Apologies for that technical hitch, but welcome back and thank you for staying with us here on Good Morning Kenya. You're watching People and Politics. My name is Mike. Maybe we take a quick look at what is making headlines in our local dailies before we get into our day's conversation. And let me start with the Daily Nation. Inside Ruto's policy U-turns, that is what is splashed on the front page of the Daily Nation. HELB releases upkeep cash to university students who had stormed city offices. Now here they're saying, faced with the dilemma of a nationwide public university student strike and compliance with a court order, the government has reverted to the old funding model to send money to learners, adding to a growing list of shift back to the old order in what is becoming a trend for the Kenya Kwanza government. For the Kenya Kwanza regime, whenever changes it seeks to implement run into headwinds. That story is told on page 4 of the Daily Nation. Probe reveals big mess at Afya House, at a multiplicity of laws, regulatory authorities, and lack of proper data has created chaos at the Ministry of Health. The Presidential Task Force on Human Resource for Health has told MPs. Task Force Chairperson Hama Rogo yesterday told National Assembly's Committee on Health that the ministry has many conflicting policy documents. That story is told on the back page of the Daily Nation. How Al-Shabaab abducted 5 chiefs in Mandera. What was supposed to be a routine exercise to screen applicants seeking national identity cards has turned into a major security scare after the administrators were seized and driven towards Somalia. That story is told on page 3 of the Daily Nation. Let's look at what is making headlines in the Standard. Chiefs abducted. A day before President William Ruto embarks on a tour of northeastern Kenya, a suspected Al-Shabaab terrorists struck, picking up 5 administrators who were planning the visit. That story is told on page 4 and 5 of the Standard newspaper. Boundaries woes to get worse after AG plea. The Attorney General has told Supreme Court judges that there is no time to review boundaries, meaning the 2027 poll will be conducted with outdated unit. That is a story you can read on page 8. New NSSF rate to trim pay further business. That is told on page 35 of the Standard. Ramaphosa versus Trump over land policy. Read that story on page 37 of the Standard newspaper. Why 2025 promises political fireworks. Gachagua is already working to build new alliances with Azimio's top gun as disgruntled by Raila Odinga. That story is told on page 4 and 5 of the Star newspaper. Gachagua allies in committees targeted in fresh radical purge. President William Ruto and opposition chief Raila Odinga's troops are plotting radical changes in the leadership and membership of the parliamentary committees. Former DP Rigathi Gachagua's allies, chairpersons, vice chairpersons, and absentee members are among those who are targeted in the looming purge. That story is told on page 6 of the Star newspaper, so you can get your favorite local daily and read what they are saying. Now I'm joined by Advocate Ken Odhiambo, who is an advocate of the High Court. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, thank you.
And also Riziki Dunstan, who is a lawyer and also governance expert and the National Vice Chair, National Reconstruction Alliance Party. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing this morning?
You're doing well, thank you.
Yes, karibu sana. Now, let's just go through what is making headlines in this local dailies. Inside Ruto's policy U-turns, faced with the dilemma of a nationwide public university students and compliance with the court order, the government has reverted to the old funding model. Let me start with you, Wakili Ken. What do you make of this?
I think the new funding model that was being introduced, I think it was had not been the consultation had not been done properly. I think the decision that were made by some people that did not consult the stakeholders. So now that it is not working, there's an outcry from students and I think the universities. So now they have to go back to that old one. I think the real issue was not consulting the stakeholders. So now implementation was a problem because the funding model, how to know who to fund, that alone. What they were saying, we will give different amounts without really proper framework on how you determine who to get and who not to get. So now with that failing, with now universities being crippled, students almost going on a riot, now that U-turn was necessary. Yes, I think that is why they're making that decision to change to the old system. Maybe they'll come with the new one, but I think after proper consultation, maybe. Yeah, but I think the issue has been not consulting, making a decision without reaching out to people, the consumers of that fund. So if you don't reach out to them and know how it was being done, then now you're supposed to, you face that backlash. So you have to go back to the old system.
All right. Riziki, what do you think of this? Because this is the help. Here they're accepting state resorts to help to release upkeep cash to students to avert a crisis after the new funding model was blocked by the courts.
Actually, the first major problem that this administration faces is the aspect of compliance, legal compliance with the Constitution. Article 10 of the Constitution gives parameters, and one of the parameters that any state ought to adhere to is public participation. The courts or the implementation of various legislative statutes and policies ought to be taken through that process of public participation, and the failure to take the kind of policies and regulations through public participation was the Waterloo, or is the Waterloo of this administration, because majority of the decisions, majority of the policies have not been able to be accepted or taken through that public participation, and that is the basis of these regulations or these policies being thrown out. So going forward, probably what the administration ought to do is basically they ought to adhere to Article 10 of the Constitution that guarantees or gives the framework of public participation. The Supreme Court was also very categorical on aspects of how public participation ought to be taken through. The public or the consumers or the stakeholders in the entire process ought to be informed. The other aspect is the public participation and the stakeholders, in this case the students, the process by which the identification of the various bands are done or is taken through has not been clearly stipulated. And assuming it's clear, then it will really give the basis or the pedestal upon which the entire process, the entire funding model is going to be embedded. But far beyond that, we're also seeing that the education sector at large is also facing a number of upheavals, more so with the aspect of capitation, the aspect of staffing, also the administration. There are a number of malpractices within the universities. You're seeing more university also having issues in terms of mismanagement and maladministration. So basically the entire education sector, if you're looking at it, it's not just about probably the capitation and the funding model. There are other minor challenges that come put together form a major problem. If you look at almost all the universities are facing issues of issues of funding, issues of administration, and probably assuming we ought to streamline the education sector. It's not about only funding, but also about the culture. It's about the professionalism of the institutions. It's about how the senates of those institutions are appointed. So, I can say it's a combo. If you have to do a number of things to make them right. So going forward, the entire education sector needs to say a sort of rethinking in terms of how they are going to do their things.
Now that you're talking about these issues to do with policy, do you think that in a way they were rushed to be implemented without fully understanding if they work or not?
Yes, I think that's the biggest problem, we must say, with the administration. I think there could be a very small group that makes the decision. and then they want to roll it out. So now, you know, before you roll something out, then you must really know who really consumed this service. How has it been done before? What is wrong with the old way of doing things? And then what will the new model or new changes, which positive impact will they bring in that sector? But then if you bring, there's something we call, in law we used to call it legal transplanting. And this one I would also call it policy transplanting. That you pick a policy from wherever it is, then you want to put it in an environment that you don't know that will work. It is bound to fail because of the different circumstances that prevail. So probably someone goes somewhere, looks at a policy from maybe a different country, you bring it, you throw it into our system, you don't know it will come out, then it fails.
So it's like a trial and error?
Yes. So I think that is where we are. So I think if we are more of take time, because the education system is so big in Kenya. It is so big. So if you want to change it, I believe it may even take 5 years to make you want to change a system like an education say that is so big. I think it takes a lot of time. So for you to implement it, I believe it may even take a lot of time for its implementation. You can start discussing, then even take 5 years. But if you want to discuss it today, then maybe in 2 months you are implementing. Obviously, it's going to fail. So I think this is what is happening, and more is going to happen if this is the approach that we are going to adopt going forward.
You also look at the challenges that things like SHA are facing, the complaints that have come, the inefficiencies, and now the reverting back to old funding model. Was it necessary to do away with it immediately, or first we would have looked at the loopholes within those systems, correct them, and before we introduce new things? Wakili Riziki.
The first thing is probably around SHA and other new programs that the government is trying to introduce. The major problem that they are facing is lack of seamless transition. Yes. So anytime you have a seamless lack of seamless transition, is basically you are playing Russian roulette in the sense that you are shooting yourself on the head, and by virtue of doing that, you are bound to die. So if you look at for example, SHA, as much as probably it has not, it has withstood the legal challenges in court, the seamless transition has not happened in terms of the consumers, in terms of the stakeholders being involved, in terms of knowing how the funds are collected, in terms of how the payments are cleared, and all that. So the major problem that we are facing is that aspect of lack of consultation, the aspect of rushing through government projects and programs, the aspect of lack of a legislative framework that is so detailed that may be able to counter or be able to handle any problems that might come along the way. So most of our legislative framework, and that's why you're seeing them being challenged in court, are not watertight in the sense that they only address the substance but not the procedure. So the lack of a substantive framework that addresses all the challenges that might come out of a particular policy is what will really be the basis of these challenges. So if you want to handle or how laws are prepared, then that budget, the procedural aspect will have been that, first of all, what is the policy? What is the government policy on, let's say, on SHA? Then after that, then that policy should be the basis of the legislation. But if you have the legislation first and then policy come later on, that's why you have these challenges, because policy will have addressed the real issues, the teething problems, as to who are the people, who are the beneficiaries, how the payment is done. Do you have a system? So why do you have a legislation first, then you go and procure a system? It means that you are starting from is topsy-turvy in the sense that you are starting from the head and not from
climbing the tree from the top.
Yeah, so it is first of all, come up with a policy, come up with a system, right? Then pilot it. Actually, that is how best you can be able to achieve some of these things. For example, I've said if pilot it for some time first, and see how it's implemented, what are the challenges, see how best to address those challenges, then come now implement it. Same to the university model, the funding model. We have very many institutions right now, handling the issues of university funding. The courts have pronounced themselves on a number of, the university fund, then the constitutionality of the university fund. The court has pronounced itself now on the funding model as it is. So, as we collapse, for example, the president through the executive order collapsed some of these institutions into a single institution. So, assuming that is done, then how best will you be able to explain? So when you are funding education, how do you fund it? Because the university fund by itself has been declared unconstitutional. The president has probably agreed with it and collapsed the university fund together with the Higher Education Loans Board. So by virtue of that, there's already a crisis because you don't know which is this institution that is basically given the responsibility or the mandate to govern the entire educational process. So probably there's need of the stakeholder thinking and really come up with one clear approach towards education funding. If you're pursuing a collapsed, or a conjoined funding model, then let's go by it. Then probably have the necessary amendments towards the law to achieve that. If you're pursuing, funding through help, as we know have reverted to, then also make the necessary amendments to the law to enable that. The other thing is that some of these universities also have their own acts. They have their own laws that really govern the entire process, and probably rethink the entire education sector. Do we need, what is this percentage from our GDP that we are using to fund our university, more so the areas of research, so that universities are also not necessarily just dependent on the funding model, but also the university should also generate money and income through research, through a number of things that others are able to do business in other countries. So we ought to rethink, re-engineer the entire education model or the university funding model and anchor it on our GDP, in the sense that what is this international required standard that our GDP, 1% of our GDP ought to go towards funding the university model, funding the university and research in the universities. So this can be one of the avenues through which you can also generate money for our universities. And I think that is the way other countries are doing. South Africa is doing that. Canada is doing that. Probably we ought to go the same way.
Right. Wakili, Dunstan here raises something about the implementation, but also something to do with procedure. The procedure now of implementation of these policies. So does it mean that when we are coming up with policies, we do not take a holistic look at it, especially when it comes to the implementation part of it?
Ordinarily, when you come with a legislative instrument, an act of parliament, they are always what we call regulations. So regulations are now what now operationalizes the act. So sometimes you realize that regulations come much later, after passing of an act of parliament. So now that is why an act of parliament becomes operative, but then now they say that there'll be regulations to be made by a minister. So now you realize those regulations, they still not be in place to operationalize the act. So if you start using that act before those regulations, you're going to have those procedural problems talking about. But after regulations are out, so you realize the regulations come much later, because they're made actually by a minister now. So now that is where the procedural aspects come in. We have an act just lays out the framework, the structures, the body that will implement it. Then now we have regulations that now in detail says what to be done to make the act operational. So I think that is where the problem is. So the main issue is how the speed with which we try to implement some of these things. If we take time, come up with regulations, now to operationalize the act, so that is easy. You tell someone, these are the regulations. They're already been gazetted. So now they can easily follow up on them. But if you come up in an act of parliament, it starts operation. No one knows what it is, how to even go about it. Then there's a problem. So I think I would want to agree with my colleague on that aspect, that the procedure in terms of now regulations not being there in time, but you are already implementing, you're already running with the idea. Obviously it won't work.
Yes.
So until those regulations come in place, people really know what you need to do, because you'll find an act of parliament, a section simply saying you are required to do this. But then now, how do you actually do it? That now comes in the regulations. So sometimes they're not even there in time. So I think that is the procedural technicality that my colleague is talking about. Yes.
Now, there's a story here on the front page of the Standard, and boundaries woe to get was after AG plea. The Attorney General has told Supreme Court judges that there's no time to review boundaries, meaning the 2027 poll will be conducted with outdated units. What do you think of that? Because we are 1 year past the deadline that was supposed to be there for delimitation of boundaries. Let me start with you, Akili Ken.
Yes.
What do you think of that, and what does it mean now that we might go to 2027 without delimitation of boundaries?
Okay. Speaking, IBC is just coming into place. So that exercise could not have been done before. So actually, most people knew it was not going to happen. There were some boundaries that were supposed to be created.
Yes.
That is not, I know of some constituencies that were supposed to be split. Now that's not going to happen. So for me, I would read the deliberateness in just ensuring that these things don't happen.
Yes.
Yes, because how do you call it? You decided to curtail something legally. So now it's not you, it is the law that stops you. There's no time. So if you say there's no time, there's nothing that can be done about it. So this thing was was a deliberate attempt to not really change anything. But again, looking at it, I really don't think that will really affect, it will affect service delivery to the people. It will not really affect the political framework of our country. But again, it will affect service delivery. Because there are areas that are too big for governance. So now they need to be reduced so that there's service closer to the people. Because you find a constituency that is so big, some constituencies are so big in this country, that service delivery, when they get the same amount of money from from for example, the national government, with the big size they have, then there's a problem. There'll be service delivery to the people will be affected. So if we had time, if these things would have been done earlier, IBC was in place very early, these are things that could have been addressed. But as it is, I think we'll have to wait a little longer, maybe after the next election, to start the process of now creating those boundaries. But the people who are going to suffer most now are the people who come from these areas that needed to be split, so that services are brought closer to the people.
Yes. The IEBC had sought an advisory from the Supreme Court regarding this matter. It's something I want you to touch on once we come back from this short break. Don't go too far. This is Good Morning Kenya. Thank you for staying with us. This is People and Politics. My name is Mark Migwi. We are having this conversation with Ken Odhiambo, who is an advocate of the High Court, and also Riziki Dunstan, who is a lawyer and governance expert. Before we went on a break, we were talking about matters to do with IEBC, and they had sought an advisory on whether to proceed with the limitation and other aspects within or activities within the commission without the commissioners. And now here, the AG has moved to block IEBC advisory request on boundary delimitation. What do you think of that, Dunstan?
One, the AG as a principal government advisor, for that matter, she probably has information that we might not have. She's privy to information that we probably might not have. And it might not largely be legal, but might be political in nature. Two, I foresee a situation whereby the entire process, we're just coming to a point of, having the selection panel begin its duties. And the selection panel also has a number of challenges. So if a selection panel begins its duty and appoints the commissioners, then the commission will now be constituted legally to be able to do a number of things, and one of those things is the delimitation of the boundaries. And delimitation of boundaries is also a constitutional mandate for the commission. Being a constitutional mandate for the commission, therefore, we expect that the Supreme Court will also, if not now, then later on, will be challenged on the legality, assuming they uphold the position of the AG. The Supreme Court probably in the how do you call it? In the 2027 elections, will be challenged on the legality of their advisory. And by the very nature that the advisory opinion are not binding. Is basically a direction that you give, Article 163 of the Constitution. You're just giving guidance to the various government organs that are supposed to, or information, or guiding them to adhere to a particular legal framework. This has also been subject to also debate, because when you seek an advisory opinion from the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the land, then what does it leave? If they gave you a wrong advisory, for example, do you just stick by it? Because what are the options? So looking at it futuristic is that I foresee a situation whereby the aspect of representation, the political rights, the aspect of representation are very categorical or very clear, or in terms of how they ought to be achieved. 2027 might be a legal landmine, in the sense that, assuming you are a voter in, for example, Kandui. Kandui has a population of about 140,000 voters as a constituency. And you feel unrepresented in comparison with a voter from Budalangi, for example. Then can you be able to challenge, that you are not well represented, as my colleague has shared? So we ought not to see this delimitation and advisory opinion only from the perspective of the composition of the IBC alone, but let us look at it futuristic. Will it be the basis of Supreme Court challenges in 2027? Because assuming you don't correct the mess right now, and there's a constitutional mess, and then this mess will remain there and then come to haunt us in 2027. But alive to the challenges and the timelines, then we also agree that probably the delimitation might not be done between now and 2027, because the commissioners are not in place. They'll just be in place for a short time. Then they start preparing for the election, that is having the voter registration, which is a continuous process. But we have a number of by-elections. Their in-tray is already full. You have by-elections both for MPs and for MCAs. We have a number of issues that they ought to now bring sanity and order. They have to inspire confidence in the entire IBC commission at large. So the in-tray is full. The timelines for the limitations are limited. But again, what is the law? Because the limitation is also a constitutional function. Well, assuming the commissioners don't adhere to it, don't we see a situation whereby there will be a lot of challenges, the legal challenges towards its functionality?
Yes. Wakili Ken, is an advisory, should it be based on law, or is it an interpretation of the law?
Okay. The Supreme Court has an advisory jurisdiction under the Constitution. I think it's Article around 163, that gives it powers to give advisory opinion. And I think it's for good reason. And I think the national government, even the AG has gone to the Supreme Court before to seek for an advisory opinion, just to be safe, that we've given the Supreme Court that jurisdiction, probably because it is the highest court. So it has that by law. So now, anybody, IBC, any state organ, even the county government and national government can go to the Supreme Court and say, what is your understanding of this provision? And then from there now, will you be in compliance if we proceed in this manner? So anyone can always put a reference before the Supreme Court to get a legal advisory opinion on how to proceed. Of course, if that matter is not pending before any other court. So like what you've said, IBC is seeking an opinion. Of course, the AG should not be opposing. The AG should only give an opinion.
Yes.
Its opinion on what the IBC seeks an advisory on. So really, I wouldn't call it opposing as much, but they should give their opinion on what they think it should be.
Her argument here is that the Secretariat cannot sue on behalf of IEBC, and the advisory sort is defective, and there are no commissioners in place, and there is no urgency on the matter, as time has already lapsed. Of course, there are other reasons she has given, but the aspect of time, having no commissioners, and the Secretariat cannot sue. Those are some of the reasons she has given.
I think that's a very active opposition. Yes. Or rather, they would have not challenged it on a technicality, because that's really a technical opposition. It is not actually based on fact. It is simply saying you don't even have the capacity to seek an opinion. For me, I think that's a very wrong approach. The best approach would have been you let them seek that opinion. Let the Supreme Court give its advisory. The AG maybe should challenge it on something else, that, or not even challenge it, give its opinion on why they think, on what they think that advisory should be. So that the Supreme can consider their opinion. But challenging in terms of even saying that you should not even go to the Supreme Court, I think it's more of a serious attack actually on the IBC, in my view. But IBC is also a constitutional body created by our constitution. I think they have a legitimate right to proceed to the Supreme Court. Any state organ can do that. So for the head AG as being the chief legal advisor to the government of Kenya, making such a serious attack or rather opposition to that advisory, more so on a technicality. I mean, that will tell you the government position. Actually, what is happening there is that's the government position. Because you don't speak, you speak for your client, and the client of the AG is the government.
Yes.
So now, that's the government position. That IBC, you should not even be seen at the Supreme Court. Yes, because you are not even constituted. I would rather have had them challenging it on something else. That let the Supreme Court say so. Yes.
What does this advisory mean for posterity? Is it just for now, or just for? It also affects the future. Should something like this happen?
The reason why this advisory we came up with this, and I think there's something we call in law the mischief rule. That what do we intend to avert by coming up with this idea that we get an advisory was, I think, for good order. So that if you are in doubt, to avoid going several steps, and then it turns out all those that you are doing is a nullity. Why can't we just go to court first and ask them, what is your idea if we proceed in this manner? So that when you are moving forward, your actions are actually anchored in an advice and an opinion from a court. And the Supreme Court is a big bench. So as much as they would be wrong, we would assume that with the caliber of the court and the number of people that are going to give you the opinion, it is more likely to be useful. So I think it was for avoiding situations where you proceed recklessly, you reach some place, you've already spent resources, then now all that becomes a nullity and you have to go back to square one. Yes, I think that was why we came up with that decision. Yes.
Of course, we are going to keep tabs on that development and inform you accordingly. Let's talk about that something important that happened yesterday. The CS Treasury, that is John Mbadi, went to a Bunge la Mwananchi forum to talk about government policies and matters country's finance. First of all, let me start with you. What do you think of that move? Going to a forum like Bunge la Mwananchi?
I think that's the way the government should run, because, you know, to avert these aspects of, you know, lack of public participation. But more importantly is also the basis of a participatory leadership, so that, you know, you are able to hear what a common mwananchi thinks about government policy. If you listened to the presentation of or the debates that are going on there,
Yes.
they were very informative debates. Probably ideas that will not have been, you know, vented out in other channels.
Yeah.
But through that kind of forum, they were able to share their ideas. So the leadership should not just be, you know, this armchair and office kind of leadership. And public participation should not be very, you know, in terms of straight jacket kind of approach. But that reaching out to the people through such kind of forums should be encouraged. Actually, the budget making process through the National Assembly has budget for that, for public participation. So as they begin off this process, you know, that aspect of engaging the public is actually budgeted for. So it is a better use of mostly you know, our funds, is a prudent use of our funds, but also it gives a 3D dimension towards what ought to be a participatory government for me.
Wakili, I want to get your sentiments on this, and also, is this a future of public participation from where you stand, especially when it comes to matters budget making process, and also is it an effective way?
Yes, I think the issue was effectiveness. I think that's the issue, because I saw it yesterday, and I think it is good PR, very good. Actually, it will make a government look good if they would proceed in that manner. Now the question is, how effective is it? Okay, these things that have been the citizenry were saying we need to be taken into account.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you can say now, we are hearing you. You've been complaining. Now we are here. Tell us. Now, you've been told. Will they be actually taken into account when they are coming up with policy, when you are doing implementation? So that is the issue. That is the biggest issue. Because the public participation is much bigger. It goes also to quality of the public participation and relevance also. Because also, you realize, if you, like what we are talking about, the funding model for universities, you do public participation, but you decide to go to Mudura market for public consultation on university funding. You may hear all manner of views, but will you also get the quality opinions on it? Are you also consulting the right people on it? Yes, there's public participation, but then you go to what I saw yesterday. It is good. They'll air their views. I saw the KRA chairman and all that. They were talking about how discussing with the people what they'll need to do. I saw somebody talking about it. And, but now the question is, one, the groups you're meeting, will it be enough to just meet a crowd? You don't know what they do, you don't know anything, you don't know their knowledge in the area you are thinking you are doing public participation on. So that whatever they tell you may not even be used. So I think that route was good in terms of making the government look good, considering that it has been accused, and rightly so, for failing to involve the people. So this time, what they did is a step in the right direction, but the question is, will it be effective enough to be useful? One, those ideas, were they being recorded? Was there anywhere to put them in? Or it was just that noise, then people go back? And then also the issue of the type of crowd. I've always seen this budget policies when they're doing budgeting for the counties.
Yes.
They write the halls that people will be meeting in. But I think now you should be able to have various groups participating. General public, there are also other people who have more understanding on these issues, also participating. So that when you sit down, you are able to compare it with your team as a government, and then now coming up with a better, with better policies. But what happened if it can continue going? And then we see the feedback, whether, because now, somebody talking about that there will be no tax, there may be no tax increase in the new finance bill.
Yes, especially when it comes to employment income.
Yes. So I think it was very clear, there may be no increase. So even the minister is not very sure, the cabinet secretary is not sure about what will be in the finance bill as much. So he's just saying there may be no serious changes that we are going to introduce in terms of taxes in the new finance bill. So I think when they're meeting the people next, the best thing would have been when they come to the people, they have that data, that this is what is going to be there. What are your opinions? What I was seeing yesterday was more a generalized venting session. That's what I would call it. Because it was not a very guided conversation. Everyone was saying everything, from price of unga to money in their pockets. So it was all, everything, things were all over. People were just discussing everything. So I think next time they may be able to tell them, we are coming to Jivanji, but we are coming to discuss 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we are coming with what we intend to do. So that people attack those issues directly. But now, what I saw, though good, a good start, but it was more of a venting session. People just airing out their emotions and their frustrations.
As you come into that, the effectiveness of such forums should be measured in terms of the way their ideas are taken, considered, and implemented.
One, you see, in the Court of Appeal decision of Tata versus the Cabinet Secretary of Finance, which I think forms the basis of this public engagement, Umtata's argument was that any time you do public participation, the reasons for refusal of an idea or the reason of taking up an idea should be given or should be noted. And that is now the law. That any time you do public participation, the presumption is that whatever you are seeing now is a precursor of what the Treasury intends to achieve. Reason being, we don't have the finance bill out yet. Once it's out, then anytime you engage with that document and you give your views and reasons, then any idea that is given by such a forum or by such a group of people, an organized group of people, they ought to give a memoranda first, either in writing. They ought to share the ideas the way they were sharing yesterday. And Treasury and the finance committee of the National Assembly, assuming they refuse an idea and they think probably it is not appropriate or probably it can be implemented in phases, the law as it is right now requires that they ought to give the public the reason for their refusal. Actually, that will be the biggest hurdle for this year's finance bill. Because the law has given another requirement that if people are saying that we don't want to be charged, for example, a particular tax, and then they give the reason. So that reason should be the basis of your refusal or your acceptance. So as you look forward towards this year's finance bill, then that should be the basis. But what's more important, what was happening at Jivanji was just a precursor. We don't have a finance bill out yet, so they were discussing, they were just venting the ideas. They were just hot air. until we have the bill out, then that discussion after the bill, then it has to be very, very clear. Because this time round you fail on that, you go to the High Court, the Constitutional Division, they'll throw it out again. Actually, that is the position.
Yeah.
You just don't give reasons for your particular decisions. Then we're going to face a really difficult time to implement, to have the act, debated and even passed.
Yes. I just add something.
Yes.
I think the decision to do what they did, I think this idea must have been mooted somewhere, and someone thought this must be a good idea.
Yeah.
So they were just proceeding. Let's go there. Let's hear them. So people were discussing nothing. We were just on a hear the people tour. Like, let's hear them generally. So really, I won't say they were even consulting people.
Yeah.
It was just like, let's hear what they have to say. Let them come and tell us what is from their chest, so that there's a feeling, like the Treasury and the KRA listens to the people.
Yes.
But I think a proper effective one would require pointers. This is what we are coming to discuss.
Yeah.
Get ready, and then tell us your opinion on 1, 2, and 3. But if you just come, even you don't have the document.
Yes.
As a CS,
Yes.
I think it's going to be very difficult.
Still on you, does, the issue around taxes and taxing employment income has generated a lot of debate. I know that the CS Treasury is seen now to be engaging the people. Does it preempt the politics of what has been termed as saving or restoring the dignity of the payslip?
Okay. I think it will go to how will we do it? You know what? These deductions are now statutory. The deductions are now anchored in law. They are not suggestions anymore. And so, how will you save? These deductions are ongoing. They are actually operational. So now, if you say you want to preserve the dignity of the payslip, what does that mean? Does it mean a repeal of the laws? Does it mean going back? Because Parliament already passed these laws, like this one for house levy. It is now the Affordable Housing Act is there. So it's not even the president anymore. It's not even the minister anymore. It is now an act of Parliament.
Yeah.
So it is being deducted by law. So if a CS comes to you and tells you, now we will preserve the dignity of your payslip, what is he even telling you? Is he saying that this 2.75, this 3% that's going to be deducted on levy, will it be scrapped off? Are we going to repeal the law? If they tell you now, we will renegotiate, are we foreseeing an amendment? But if there's no amendment, there's no repeal. Because these are now things that are statutory. It's the law that says so.
Anchored in law.
Yeah, it's no longer president to say.
Yeah.
It's no longer CS to say. It is no longer in our place to say. Unless the Parliament says, we think this is too much, we will amend, or we will repeal. I think that's the only approach now, where we sit.
Do you see this graduating from
I think
it's graduating to a political conversation or a fully fledged political showdown?
I think for me, bearing in mind that the former deputy president made it a campaign tool, I think whatever Treasury was doing was a reactive measure towards the campaign messaging. So looking at it from a legal perspective, there's little you can do because it is law. But from a political perspective, you ought to react to a particular message that is live to them at the moment, and that is what Mbadi was doing. Probably the best will be just lip service to us that probably there will be no further increase in terms of statutory deduction to contain the payslip. But the former deputy president message towards a payslip campaign might have been a killer sword because it has thrown the entire campaign or the thinking around the public financing, around the workers, around how taxes are used towards confusion. So thinking futuristic, I foresee government trying to reduce a number of taxes on the payslip. I foresee that.
You foresee that?
I foresee a situation whereby they will bring amendments in the House, more so next year, as we head towards the election, to be able to reduce a number of those tax deductions, but not by lip service. So they have to come to the floor of the House, bring amendments, and say probably these and these areas might not be working well.
Yes.
You have seen outcries around the hues around NSSF. You have seen the hues around affordable housing. They might rethink towards the same, but from the perspective of moving various amendments.
Yes.
And that can be done through even the finance bill. A finance bill can actually repeal, those kind of tax deductions.
Doesn't that make it look like you create a problem and then being seen like you're trying to solve it?
That's actually politics. Politics is about solution of problems that at times are created by the politicians.
Yes.
So, but going to an election year, 2026, finance bill might have a raft of amendments that will resonate with the local voter for purposes of getting votes. So, some people are getting reductions of about 40%. If you look at the salaries of MPs, salaries of a number of government officials, the reductions are extremely huge. So, to resonate with the voter, then you have to do something that will create a relief. But that relief will offer a political premium for those in government. So we expect that next year, not this year.
Yes.
This year it might not be the right time, but next year I foresee a situation whereby a number of there will be some reliefs. Probably, what is the best way? What's the best way in terms of approaching government policies? Do we do it for elections, or do we introduce policies for posterity? The finance bill has faced, the affordable housing faced a number of challenges, legal challenges, but the government pushed it through. Then correcting it after the cry, and share the same. There have been a lot of cry around it.
Yeah.
Then correcting it. So, why do you come up with policies? Do you come up with policies for posterity or for politics? Maybe it's for the public.
It's a valid question, Wakili. Yes. Is it for posterity or just politics?
I think the distinction between what things are and what they actually should be.
Yes.
So it should be for posterity. It should outlive us. Ordinarily, a law or a policy, it should be futuristic in approach. You should look at it in terms of generations to come. But unfortunately, we have other policies that are done for the immediate, where now what you want, it happens at every level, from even MCA here, even MP, governor. There are things, and the president now, the things that is done just so that you get a re-election, which should not be the case. It should be something that should make sense even for the next holder of office, and should be implemented even without you. I think that is what most developed countries do. Yes, they try to, so that even if the person who occupies office, there will be no major change in how governance is done, because those frameworks were there, they were done for posterity. But in countries where we are sometimes, people make them for immediate gains, so that when you make it now, it will be very active for a year or two. By the time that ends, you're already back in office. But that should not be the case. I think we should be done for posterity, that the holder of the office really doesn't matter that much.
Well, gentlemen, I'm told we are out of time. I will give you each a minute to make your final submissions. Let me start with you.
Yes, I think on the issues that we've discussed, I think most of this can also be solved by the regime coming up with, currently it has what we call a trust deficit. Yes, there's a problem with the trust. So that even if it's a good thing, someone feels there's something wrong in it. Let's look at it further. but if there's a trust in the regime that there is, people tend to be more amiable. People want to accept and go on. Yeah. But because we are facing a trust deficit, I think the government should work more on its trust with the people. Because if that is failing, people tend to interrogate. The first reaction is to object if there's a trust deficit. And so there's nothing that's going to move. So if they work on their trust, I think we'll have a better chance of moving on as a country and achieving our development goals.
Okay. Yeah. Dunstan.
One is public participation is key for any government. And the implementation of the 2010 Constitution, the Article 10, Article 118, should be our pillar. So anytime you see that you're not doing right under Article 10 and Article 118 of the Constitution, then we ought to pinch ourselves, because all our legal challenges in terms of the policy framework, in terms of the legislative frameworks, is because we don't adhere to, we honor our laws in breach most on Article 10 and Article 118. Lastly, being that we are in a commit of nations, we are also facing a number of challenges within the region, most of the DRC crisis. I'll probably ask fellow Kenyans and the people from the region that probably it's time that we pray for DRC, we pray for Eastern Congo, as they try to also have amicable solution to their regional issues. And it should be a lesson to Kenya and the rest of the region that peace is very important.
All right.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, your time is very much appreciated. That is Riziki Dunstan, who is a lawyer, governance expert, and the National Vice Chair, National Reconstruction Alliance Party, and Ken Odhiambo, who is an advocate of the High Court, joining us here on Good Morning Kenya for People and Politics. This is where we end this segment. Don't go too far. Up next is Rashid Mwamkondo with Zinga, na topic ama mada yao ni bungeni mwaka huu. So thank you for tuning in. My name is Mike. We will keep it KBC Channel 1. Good morning.